Okay, good morning. It's Tuesday. Just having some coffee. Oh man, leaving the house a bit later today. Yeah, feeling a bit tired, but I did get some extra sleep, so beef grand now. Got coffee. Coffee's good. Coffee's life. Right, and off we go. Sunny day. It rained extremely heavily. It was hailstones last night. Would you believe it was summertime, eh? I didn't see any thunder, and I didn't hear any thunder. I didn't see any lightning. But the hailstones were just incredible. And I come to put something in the bin there. A little bit of cardboard in the old recycle bin. And yeah, the lid was actually soaking, and I just covered myself in water. So yeah, hopefully the sun will dry it off before I get to work, because I do look quite silly more than anything. Nice new shirt on as well. Murphy's Law, isn't it? I suppose that's just one of those things. So over the weekend I watched an interesting documentary on Netflix. I sort of heard about it, heard about the story, heard about the company, and it's probably been in the news. You've probably heard about them. It's a company called Cambridge Analytica. They're no longer in business, but they're around for quite a long time actually, and it's interesting. It's an interesting story, and I'm sure you know all about it, but I think there's some very interesting points. They essentially help sway people to vote for a particular party, or not, as the case may be, or not vote at all. Yeah, I think they've been doing it since the 90s, I think. Done a lot of African countries, some Eastern European countries. They said they'd never never done any work in Britain. It's a British company, and I believe that one of the founders had been to Cambridge University. I think hence the Cambridge moniker. They're basically selling their services to, I suppose, political parties that were campaigning for office of some sort. And they would use, shall we say, legal means. I don't know if that's don't know if that's true today, but I think they certainly thought they were using legal means to sway people. And a massive player in all this was Facebook, and the information that I think they sold to Cambridge Analytica. And it's very interesting that at one point during the Trump campaign, the Trump campaign was spending $1 million a day on adverts on Facebook. $1 million a day. Wow. And so the plan was, as I understand it, is that they would probably pick a certain group of people in society who would have the most influence on the result of an election, in whichever way the paymasters wanted it, who were paying them, and they would do all sorts of creative things. For example, it's my understanding that Trump actually got in just by the vote of 50,000 people. It was literally 50,000 people in America who decided that Trump should be president. I think it's a lot to do with the undecided voters. I think in a lot of countries, a lot of political, people they're brought up that way. They support one side over the other, and it can be hard to sway people from that. And then there's some middle ground of people who haven't a particular allegiance to either party, and who can be swayed, And well, in the case of Trump, it definitely worked. I know Facebook have had to answer some very serious questions, and I think there might have been fines in relation to other bits of information. But at one point, Cambridge Analytica boasted they had 5,000 data points on every person in America, which I'm assuming it was gleaned from Facebook, the bulk of the information, I'd say. which they were, I think, instructed to delete, and they hadn't done when they said they had. And I think they got fined over that. I think got prosecuted over that. But it did get me thinking that how all of us can be swayed. If things are presented to us a certain way, and I think it's a human quality. I don't think it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how not intelligent you are, I don't know. I think that whole demographic is sort of irrelevant. I think everybody has something which they can be swayed upon, and it's just finding that thing. And I think a good example during the Brexit campaign, which they said they wasn't involved with Cambridge Analytica, by the way, and they said they don't talk about it, so that's very interesting. But so it's emotions, isn't it? We're humans. We're quite emotive people, so. It was never any good saying, for example, Hillary Clinton, you'll use this as an example, and I have no political bias of any sort. I detest politicians equally, so, and presidents and prime ministers and Taoiseach, so, But I think Hillary Clinton they didn't say, the tagline wasn't, she's not a good politician, she's not trustworthy, it wasn't that, it was, Hillary's a crook, and should be locked up. I mean, it went real to the darkest, deepest level of emotion around it, We should be locking a politician up, wow, over what? They've not been found guilty of anything, but it's using emotion, an emotion. Well, that sells papers. It's good on Facebook for clicking on things. People like to click on things if it's a motive. If it's not a motive, then people really bother, And Brexit, there was a few things said, and I think I've spoken about Brexit in the past. I don't want to go over all ground and all that sort of stuff, but you hit the emotion and go, listen, we're giving all this money to the EU, what will we get for it? We could put that into the health service. Well, of course, if it was lying around we're sending it to you, why don't we put in the health service, But of course, that's a lot of nonsense, but it doesn't matter, it's an emotion, and it gets people thinking, and the imagery that was used had nothing to do with the UK. And, captions that was used about immigration and things like that was not relevant, to the UK. But it's all very emotive, and it gets people thinking, And I mean, there's no suggestion that anybody was coerced, or intimidated into voting. It was into voting a certain way. It's much more subtle than that. And like I say, I think we can all be swayed. I mean, if I'd have been in the UK, if I was eligible to vote in Brexit, I don't think I'd have been the person that anybody would have been targeting. He's set his ways, made his mind up, he's made an intelligent decision, leave him alone. They're looking for people who, maybe we can sway one way or the other, And there's no doubt that what they call them, Brexiteers now, the people who wanted to leave, were much more vocal and animated than the leavers. I think, nobody was getting excited. Than the Remainers. Sorry. I think the leavers were real excited, and I think, it's hard to be excited about. We're going to stay because we know how good it is. But so you can sort of see why Brexit was won, and you can also see why Trump won. He wasn't a career politician, successful businessman, been on TV, been in a movie or two, and I think that appeals to people, a lot of people. And certainly appealed enough to these 50,000 people who swung in his favour. Now, I don't know, and I sort of don't care really, if he's a good president or a bad one, because there's been some pretty rubbish ones over the years. Same with prime ministers in the UK, same with, I suppose a lot of elected leaders around the world. They talk a lot, they're usually pretty good at talking, aren't they? And Trump has a distinctive style. Irish politicians and Taoiseachs, prime ministers, are a little bit, I don't know really, no one really, there's just nothing there, I mean, and then there doesn't seem to be any real differentiation between political parties in Ireland. I've had them at the doorstep, and they say there's a huge difference, But if you have to explain it, then that's a concern. I mean, it should be obvious, shouldn't it? But, so getting back to Cambridge Analytica, who are no longer going, and I'm sure there's other companies doing similar things, shall we say. And I'm starting to go, why not? I mean, it's to me, it's like selling something, because there's psychology in sales, isn't there? I mean, look at Apple. Yeah, I have this phone. It's not as good as the other phone there, but you know what? It looks quite nice, and it's an Apple, and you know you really want it, and you really want to pay $500 more than the similar phone. So yeah, and people do it, and I have one, and I'm not into that whole thing of how a phone looks really. I wanted a big screen. I've had a Mac with work for about 6 years now. I can get Microsoft products on it, and I can also, I'm a Unix guy, which is a lot of command line stuff, a lot of typing. So Mac works very well for me in that sense. Not really interested in any of the apps and all that rubbish. And the same with the phone, I rarely use it as a phone. Quite a shock when it rings, and it does ring occasionally, quite surprising actually. But I use the data, and this big screen was a big thing for me. So I've got a MacBook for my sins. I've also got a Windows laptop as well, and a Windows PC. But I've got a MacBook, and it just seems seamless to stay with the iPhone. I'd had a very small one, the 5S, for years. I'd had a 6 or 5S, and the screen was too small for me. I could read it, but it was my fingers, which I think were too big for it. So the bigger screen, I did worry if I could actually use the bigger screen. But I find, and they're going, oh, it's OLED, it's not, LCD and all that sort of stuff. And I wasn't really bothered about that either. But I do get the OLED thing. I think the quality, especially in bright light, or like now here, I'm driving the car on the commute, and it's a big screen. I've got the map running, I know the way, but it does tell me things like if there's any hold-ups and how long and what time I'm going to be there, all sorts of nice information. And it's clear on the screen, and I don't feel like my fingers are too big for it. I do try to use it with one hand. I didn't want a phone I needed 2 hands for. And in the main, I can use it. Obviously, if I'm going to type a long message or an email, then yeah. But there's a nice feature there with the iPhone that you can have speech to text instead of the keyboard, which I've used, and it's fantastic actually. It's pretty clever how it works, and it corrects the sentence when it realises what you're saying. But I did realise my messages suddenly got longer and longer. I have a habit of talking a lot. I'm not quite sure if you noticed that, but so I started sending these voluminous, huge messages with all the correct spelling and all the rest of it, punctuation and capitalised sentences. It was fantastic, but a bit intimidating, I think, if you're on the receiving end of this. You're probably wondering, what's this guy up to? How the hell's he doing all this typing? He's driving the car as well or whatever. But it's a speech to text, and I quite like it. I don't use it a lot if I'm in the office or if I'm in public. I always feel a bit silly talking to the phone. I mean, that's what it was invented for, wasn't it, I suppose? But because I get so few phone calls, it's not a big deal. So I bought the iPhone XS Max, and it's a good phone. The battery was always a thing for me as well. I had this habit of charging every night, and it breaks the battery after 2 years when it needs replacing. So in this case, though, I don't charge anymore. I've been telling people I never charge it now, and it's like magic for me. This is brilliant. So I could easily get 2 to 3 days, provided I'm doing too much screen work on it. And if I notice the indicators below 50%, I plug it in the car, I plug it in the office. But in general, I wouldn't charge it next to the bed anymore. And I think that's a good idea. And hopefully the battery will last a lot longer. But yeah, it's a nice phone. But there you are. I've been swayed. I consider myself to be intelligent. Maybe I'm not actually. Anyway, so that's a thought. I'm actually stupid, I've got an iPhone, but you can see though how sales, for me, effective selling is all about. And I don't want to use the word manipulating. Manipulating sounds a little bit nefarious, like you're making people do what they don't want to do. And there's no suggestion that ever happened in any of the campaigns that Cambridge Analytica were involved. It is really selling. It's giving people what they want, or what they want to hear, or what they want to do.